Weedles are often found in forests and grasslands. His sharp and toxic needle is about 2 inches, and I guess that makes me part Weedle too. But what would happen if we threw him into the past or future? This was one of those concepts that actually came to mind pretty quickly. Before even starting on this piece, I already knew what I wanted to do with it, and that's why it didn't take me long to actually make this sketch. My vision for this line was that they would all be part of a drilling company, so each and every stage would just get better at digging. We first started out by mapping out its body, and we did that by using squares instead of circles for his body to make him feel more metallic. And I once again wanted to try something different. That was to separate the drill from its body by using cables in between of them, and I also made sure that you can see the cables go through its segments as if it's really connected to the Pokemon. At one point I wanted to add toes to his feet, but in the end we opted not to do so because this made the design feel quite busy, and it also took attention from its body and made you look into his toes, which is not something I want to do. Then for the colors we just used Weedle colors again and gave him the pink for the lighted parts, and that doesn't really fit the part ground typing, but in order to keep the Weedle color palette alive, pink it is, I guess. Iron Beedrill, the future form of Weedle. This Pokemon was made to help with digging small tunnels. Its strong metal body can twist and turn through tight spaces, and the drills on its head break through dirt and rock with ease. To be fair, this design actually is another 10 out of 10. I have no clue what I would have done differently on this piece. To me, it really does feel like a Weedle, and it also feels like a robotic version of Weedle, so I would just give this one a 10 out of 10 for sure. The future form of Kakuna was extremely easy. I will once again admit that I made this piece after I did the Beedrill piece. This made it even easier because I now knew where this piece is going to. We simply created the head shape of Kakuna and brought back a type of necklace, but this might come back into the Beedrill design, so hold on and I will tell you later what that is. Other than that, we just made this entire piece into a drill, and we did this because I saw a vision where you could actually use this Pokemon as a drill by holding it and just dig in with the Pokemon, and that's pretty cool, to be honest. The colors were not that interesting at all because we only have 4 colors in the palette: the yellow for his head shape, the gray versus for his neck color, and a slightly darker pink for the lighted parts. Iron Drill, the future form of Kakuna. This Pokemon drills into the ground and stays still to help loosen soil. It can also be picked up and used like a handheld drill thanks to its shape and spinning tip. It is often used in places where machines are too big to fit. I guess I am not the biggest fan of this piece. It might just be because it's so simple and the other ones are just way more intricate, but it just feels a little bit flat because of the lack of details on the Pokemon. I will say that I'm a fan of his lore because I feel like that does fit the Pokemon quite well, but overall it's not the best design. Alright, the future form of Beedrill. We began by dissecting his body into simple shapes, and afterwards we could just start on adding in the details. I really wanted to make sure that it would keep the segmented feeling of Beedrill, and that is of course extremely helpful for a future form in general. I envisioned this Pokemon to be an extremely good tool for a drilling company. This is why we turned his needle part into a big drill, but also turned his arms into drills, and we put 2 little drills on the top of his head. I will now finally explain what the neck color was on the Kakuna piece, and that was the lag that this Pokemon has on its back. If you go back and take a look at Kakuna, you can now see that the neck color are actually the toes of this Beedrill piece. I did envision this Pokemon to be able to float, but in my opinion it would just be boring to give him a thruster on his back in order to give him that pressure forwards to actually drill. I just thought it would be way cooler if he would have a lag that he could use in order to settle him down onto the ground and then dig. This would make him futuristic, but at the same time quite realistic as well, right? I will say that I struggled quite a bit while figuring out the eye shape because Beedrill has a certain eye shape, but I prefer to use the screen method for eyes, and that just doesn't work for those particular eyes. Iron Beedrill, the future form of Beedrill. This Pokemon was built for big digging jobs. It uses its large drills to break through tough ground, and the strong leg on its back helps keep it steady while it works. Its design is based on old records of teamwork between insect Pokemon and early drilling machines. Big digging jobs, you know. I am extremely happy with this piece. I feel like it does combine all the good elements of this entire line into one big drilling monster. I could really see a huge digging site where just thousands of this Pokemon are just digging away at the dirt right there. It might also be due to its color palette, because that does feel really construction sidey. So yeah, I'm extremely happy with this piece. For the past form of Weedle, I came up with the idea to turn this entire line into scorpions. This made me start out to map out a Weedle body, but the first sketch I made just didn't feel like Weedle anymore, and it actually looked more like a second stage as well. This made me opt into a different sketch, and I made sure to make his features feel a lot more first stage like. We maintained the big head shape, the big eyes, made his claws a lot smaller, and we made his pincers feel a lot cuter too. I also removed quite a few legs from the piece. I do believe that scorpions have 8 legs together with the pincers on front, but for my piece it actually worked better to give him 6 arms instead of the 8. For the colors we sort of went with regular Weedle colors, but we added the yellow for the paradox eyes and added a red color for the makeup and the little knobs on his pincers. Barbed Stinger, that past form of Weedle. This Pokemon lived in ancient forest where it burrowed underground and used its sharp claws to defend itself. Its strong tail was tipped with a toxin-filled barb that it used to scare off predators. Alright, Barbed Stinger, another past form. I think it's a beautiful concept of a past form. This to me feels like it could genuinely be an ancestor of Weedle. It doesn't change him that drastically, but it does at the same time, right? I also love the makeup under his eye, which really add to the feisty feeling of the Pokemon. Although the changes are simple, I do think it's an extremely good piece. Onto the past form of Kakuna, where I wanted to make sure that he wouldn't feel like a stationary Pokemon anymore. I wanted to make it feel like he would be coming towards the screen and towards you as if he's fully in action. I will say that the transformation wasn't even that difficult, because Kakuna is basically just a cylinder stretched out into a point. We once again just went for the 6 limbs and made his tail feel like he was coming forward too. Other than that, he wasn't that different from the first stage, just the shape of body and that he has bigger pincers, plus the horns on his head are just a little bit bigger as well. Stinged Scorp, the past form of Kakuna. This Pokemon would stay still while its outer shell hardened. If it was attacked, it could strike quickly with its claws, delivering a painful sting before hiding again. Well, Stinging Scorp. On this piece I think we did a really good job at building out the scorpion part of the line. It genuinely feels like a scorpion, and it also feels like it can attack you, instead of the Kakuna just being stuck in its body. I will admit that it also looks a little bit forced. It does look a bit like we have forced Kakuna into a scorpion, but at the same time that might actually be a good thing, because now it does still feel like Kakuna. Now onto the past form of Beedrill, and I will say that this Pokemon is either something you completely hate or something that you can kinda like. I went hard into the buffed scorpion look of the Pokemon, but this does mean that it's a drastic change from what Beedrill usually is. I definitely struggled big time while creating its body too. I'm not the happiest with the way the Pokemon looks, but I do think in the end it looks decent. We went for a ginormous tail on the back of the Pokemon, made his arms and pincers feel a lot stronger, added 2 big extra legs. We once again also increased the size of the horns of his head, and we just made sure to use a lot of jagged lines on the design to just sell the part poison type of the Pokemon. For the colors we decided to remove the blue from the limbs of the regular Beedrill and just went for a yellow, black and red color palette. Once I started rendering this piece, I felt like his body was too big, and the way I shaded it felt like he had a lot of empty spots on his body. I managed to fix this issue by simply adding a few little textures here and there, in the shading and smooching it, and in the highlights and smooching them too. Primed Piercer, the past form of Beedrill. This Pokemon lived in dangerous wild areas and used its powerful claws and huge stinger to defend its home. It was known to be brave and would fight anything that came too close. Alright, Primed Piercer. I am not sure about this piece. Okay, let's just say what I like about the piece. I do think it's an extremely cool idea to push this line into scorpions, but the execution might be lacking here and there. It doesn't necessarily feel that much like Beedrill anymore, although I do think the colors help on that department. It is still quite different from regular Beedrill. I guess the design is still quite epic, so I don't necessarily hate it, but if my execution was a little bit better, this piece would have looked way cooler than it does right now.